Welcome back to the GTN show. Yeah, I'm afraid it is just me this week. Heather and James have head out to Tenerife to film loads of content whilst I man the GTN Megabase. But I've got a good one for you today because Andrew Messick, the CEO of Ironman, has spoken. He's answered, loosely speaking, some questions around the Ironman World Championships and pro prize money. Yeah. It's an interesting one. We also have some exciting athlete sponsorship announcements, a bike infused with coffee, and some notable pro athletes moving to the sport of triathlon. All right then, before we get into that meaty Andrew Messick chat, let's have a look through some of the stuff we've spotted on social media this past week. So firstly, congratulations to Vicky Holland and Rhys Davey, who've had their first child, Emmeline Olivia Davey, born on the 29th of January. So congratulations to both of them, really cool news. Now for some of the sponsorship announcements, and I do apologise, there's quite a lot of them, notably with Canyon. So Kat Matthews has announced her signing to Canyon, as well as actually Hoob, which I'm not sure if she's announced that or not, but she's wearing a load of Hoob. Also Chelsea Sodaro, so they've got quite the roster there building up, and Florian Anger all joining Canyon. So that's pretty cool. And I did speculate a couple of weeks ago when Hayden Wild announced that he was leaving Specialized. Maybe he'll be joining Canyon. He's put up a couple of teaser videos. I'm still going to speculate it's Canyon, but as of now, we can't say for sure. And also, whilst we're talking of Canyon, they did a pretty cool collaboration with Jan Frodeno this past week in a kind of Wes Anderson style film in which they announced this coffee-infused Canyon Speedmax. Yes, weird as it sounds, really. I mean, it literally is this kind of coffee brown fade from the bottom of the bike going up. But the video is absolutely wicked. It explains kind of how Jan started his Frodismo coffee business and how, it's been built into this bike. Very neat, and classic Jan and Canyon. It's very well done. Also, Fenella Langridge has announced that she's signed with Trek. She was obviously riding a Trek Speed concept this last year or two anyway, so I think that's a pretty cool partnership for her. Obviously, she's very accustomed to it and probably is a preferable ride for her, so that's wicked. I did like this post from Hayden Wild as well. He said, it's the ultimate debate. Long ride Sundays, long run Sundays, or take the third option that no one likes and just run and ride long on Sundays. I agree with him, actually. I always did long ride Saturday, long run Sunday, but I've come to some other training centres over the years and they do it the other way around. What do you go for? Let us know in the comment section down below. And finally, Waterfall Racing, who are behind that couples championships we saw last year, the Waterfall Bank, etc. They had something called the Pro Project running this past year, in which they basically put out an application to budding pros that needed that extra help. And through their pro project would fund them, moving them out to Boulder, to obviously a very well-known pro training area, and funding that journey to becoming, hopefully, the next big pro athletes. So they've had that application process, they've selected their two athletes, and they are Josh Bills and Caroline McCartney, and they've just put up some photos of those two athletes packing up and heading out to Boulder. So pretty exciting times for them. All right, into the juicy part of the show, the Andrew Messick podcast. Yeah, well, I've got to start by saying a big thanks to Jack Kelly from How They Train podcast, who has put this podcast together, got Andrew Messick on board and asked those hard-hitting questions. He's done a fantastic job, and if you haven't checked out his stuff already, please do head on over because he's doing an awesome job. We've shared some of his stuff on the channel before, and absolutely love what he's doing. As Jack says at the start of the podcast, and we're going to say it here as well, I guess a big thanks also goes to Andrew Messick for coming onto that podcast and kind of answering some of those questions. As Jack says, he was a big fan of Ironman racing. It's kind of what got him into the sport, so he wants to ask these questions. Now, I'm not entirely sure this was the best showcase for Messick. As I said, doesn't do a fantastic job of answering all the questions. He eats his lunch partway through and then he storms out towards the end. Anyway, let's get into this then. So I picked out some notable parts. Messick does start off by addressing the Ironman World Championship 2-day format. And despite good plans ahead of the Ironman World Championships in 2022, Messick, in fairness, does put his hands up and admits that in reality, it wasn't that well received, and the locals just weren't prepared for Ironman to close the island down for essentially 2 days.
The reality was different. And so very soon after our 2 days of Kona, it became clear that 2 days just was not going to functionally work. And that the community of Kailua Kona, after 40 years of having us there on the second Saturday of October, was not prepared for us to be there more than 1 day. And we got that news officially through the mayor and his office, and he is a partner in everything that we did. We got this through informal channels. Remember, we have an office in Kona, and we have a number of staff who live there. We've got volunteer directors, many of whom have been working on the Ironman World Championship for 30, 40 years. And the feedback that everyone who lived there got informally in the grocery store, at church, was, guys, forget about 2 days. It's not going to happen.
And yet, we were there. It was pretty obvious from being there on the ground that the locals weren't very excited about us being there, and the disruption of a 2-day event was causing on the island. Messick also goes on to say, it wasn't the news we wanted to hear, but it's the reality of event business. The event takes place on public roads, waterways, etc., so it requires the enthusiastic support of the community. And sadly, it wasn't there. Of course, we know that by this point, Ironman had actually already announced that for 2023, they'd also be doing the 2-day format. They'd started the qualification process and promised women their own race day. So what do? Do they pivot back and do just a 1-day format again, and therefore women don't have their own race day? Or do they pursue and carry on with the 2-day format, but likely have to look for a different location for at least one of those days? Well, we all know what they decided. They went for Nice for one of the locations and Hawaii for the other, 1 month apart. Now, interestingly, he does say that Ironman actually now have more European athletes than American athletes entering events. So having an event that means less travel, less cost, and less time off work might mean that more European athletes are actually able to take part in and compete in the Ironman World Championships because they're not timed or priced out of racing in Hawaii. I mean, we have discussed this one to death already. Personally, I can see both sides to the argument. For some, the idea of qualifying for the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii is a life dream. Hawaii is kind of almost synonymous with the event. But I can also see the opportunities of moving the World Championships to different locations, and do agree with some of the points that Messick makes. In fact, Jack says the same. However, this is where the podcast takes off a little bit, as Jack challenges Messick.
I think you're right that there's a lot of people in Europe particularly who don't hate the change in location, and some people who don't mind the race being in a less extremely hot environment. And I think generally speaking, if Ironman and yourself are being honest about the reason for the race not being viable in Kona anymore is because of the island being too busy and community backlash, that people can sort of understand and even accept that. But despite that, the majority of the feedback still seems to be pretty negative, or at least what I'm seeing. So I guess thinking about it like that, it's like, if any rational person can understand that, then I have to ask myself, why are the majority of fans still so angry about it? And to me, it's clearly because the other decisions being made about the race, like the split venue, the month apart, maybe even a little bit of not believing the reasoning or thinking that there's other solutions, that maybe it might be because of money or something else like that.
And fair play to Jack for asking this. He is bang on the money here and asking the questions that we want answered. And yep, I think it riles Messick up a little bit, as you'll hear quite shortly. Jack challenges him over the size of the fields at the World Championships and the fact that they've grown.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I think this is something people are a little confused about, is the dampening or the weakening of an Ironman World Championship field. It's obviously much easier to...
Wait a second. Hang on for a second. So you think we shouldn't have women's 70, 74, that age group shouldn't exist?
I'm not jumping to Jack's defense necessarily, but he never really said that. Jack was literally just referring to the increased size of fields at the age group world championships and the roll down slots with that. Not that certain age groups shouldn't be at the world championships. But Messick is off of his point now, and yet you can listen to the podcast of him angrily go on about Jack's so-called prerogative of thinking that the world championships should be limited to athletes under the age of 50. So, Jack attempts again.
Do you think that it is in general a bit of an issue that the quality of Ironman World Championships fields have been dampened by easier and easier roll down slots to the race and therefore like greatly increased field sizes, and that the race has become more of a like, hey, let's get as many people there participating as possible so we can make as much money as possible situation, instead of it being like a true World Championships event where the people who deserve to be there and have worked hard to be there and have earned their spot to be there are the ones actually competing. And it's not about excluding anyone because of their age. It's not about that at all. But if the community of Kona is so upset by the volume of people and it's led to something so drastic as the race moving from a place where it's had like 40 years of history and that people love and is iconic with the sport of Ironman triathlon, then it just seems to be obvious to me that it's something we have to look at.
Nicely put. Well, let's see what he has to say.
I think that about 10% of the field is over 60. That's about where it's been for the last few years. And I think those are very competitive races. And the people who compete in those age groups want to win.
So Messick does go on to make some interesting points about the origin of triathlon in Hawaii and that the race isn't meant to be elitist, which is a very fair point. But as Jack says, it's evolved from that original race. This is now the World Championships. There are 100 events worldwide in which you can become an Ironman. But still, Messick responds with this.
You will probably recall that when Gordon Haller won in 1978, he went 11:35. And that there were people in the first years before he had time cutouts who were doing the race in more than 20 hours. But you may believe that only people who can do the race under 12 hours deserve to be at Kona. I mean, we don't believe that.
But I just think sport's evolved, right? Where Ironman is a much different company and sport than what it was in the early 80s, late 70s. Like, it isn't just the Ironman like at Kona anymore. There's hundreds of Ironman events worldwide. So anyone who wants to complete an Ironman now, which is obviously like a big part of your business model, is like getting people in to say that, hey, I am an Ironman, do 1 or 2 Ironmans and get them out. Like, that's obviously a big part of the model and always has been. But there's so many around the world. There's not a continent in the world where you can't go and do at least 2 Ironmans every single year and say you're an Ironman. And so people still have that opportunity. But
do you think there's something wrong with that?
I think that's a great thing. But because the sport's evolved, so have the Ironman World Championships. Like, the men's race is now being finished almost 4 hours faster than what you're talking about. Yep. So the sport is evolving and performances are getting better and age groupers are getting better, professionals are getting better. So Ironman can't, like, I don't understand the thinking of being like, well, we're going to treat this race like it was in, 1980 when the sport is 40 years evolved from that. It seems silly. Like, that's why I think, well, the sport's evolved so much, technology's evolved so much. Age groupers are now racing much faster than the people who used to win it, who were really just age groupers as well. Like, why don't you evolve with it and be like, well, we've got to make our Ironman World Championship event a little more exclusive for people who probably, it might sound a bit rough, I understand, but deserve to be there because their performance is good enough to be there. That way it makes the Ironman World Championships a much more special event.
I'm super curious. Why do you dislike old age group athletes so much? Why are you so averse?
All right, that is enough of this now. They do then go on to discuss the size of fields, cut-off times of the Ironman World Championships, and the fact that Ironman aren't listening to their customers, which you can imagine how Messick responds to that. Oh no, actually, wait, he doesn't, because he is mid-eating his lunch. Yes. How respectful. So mid-mouthful, he does explain that the reason for the Ironman World Championships being in Nice and Hawaii and a month apart from one another is the fact that the 2023 Rugby World Cup, or at least a couple of the games from the Rugby World Cup, will be taking place in Nice, and therefore they've had to separate the events by a month. In 2024, the dates will be different, and they're not ready to pull out of Kona altogether and take that 2-day format elsewhere to somewhere like Nice. So the next hard-hitting topic, pro prize money.
Do you think that the professionals are paid enough?
Compared to what?
Compared to the revenue that Ironman makes?
So yeah, things get a little bit awkward from here on. And as I've said a few times already, I would fully recommend heading on over and listening to the podcast so you can hear all that awkwardness. Messick does make a fair point here, though, that pro long distance triathletes simply wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Ironman, and I can't really argue with that. In fact, I was very impressed that he went on to credit the PTO for all the work that they're doing. But pro prize money has not increased for a very long time. In fact, in some cases, it's actually gone down in Ironman racing. And add to that, actually there's less pro races now than there were even a number of years back.
So just, Andrew, you sort of just went around the question then. Do you think that the professionals deserve to be paid an increasing percentage of Ironman's revenue as the company grows?
I think we have a fair platform for our professional and our age group athletes, for that matter.
All right then. So despite viewership being lower than many mainstream sports, why has pro prize money not increased with Ironman's percentage of revenue then?
We are way over time.
Interesting. Well, I feel like Jack was really on point with his questions in that podcast. These are questions that so many of us want to know the answers to. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I was pretty disappointed by Messick's replies and just, to be honest, his general attitude during the call and the podcast. So as I've said, I fully would recommend heading on over, listening to that podcast in full. But what do you guys think to not only the questions, but also the answers from Messick? Leave them in the comment section down below. Okay, now for the Tri news, and the first bit of news is more cycling related, but I think this is really cool. So Red Bull have just announced their Talent ID program, in which they will be using Strava and Zwift data to select their next World Tour contenders. Now, over the next 4 months, they will be challenging cyclists to certain segments in the real world using Strava data, but also these segments exist within the virtual world of Zwift, meaning that athletes all around the world can take these segments on, and then Red Bull will be analysing that data. Now, currently, this is for the Bora Hansgrohe team, so whilst anyone can get stuck into this and have fun doing it, they are looking for males born between 2006 and 2007 to fill their roster. The riders at the top of those select leaderboards will then be put through a full performance analysis, and then the 2 top performers from that performance analysis will be selected for the Bora Hansgrohe development team. Pretty neat, isn't it? All right, and now some very exciting athletes moving to the world of triathlon. We should probably warn them about that world of triathlon. But anyway, very excited to welcome them in. First of all is American middle distance or steeplechase runner and Olympian Colleen Quigley. I've actually been following her journey for quite a while now, even prior to her triathlon days when she was training with Holly Lawrence, doing a bit of running with her. Well, apparently she kind of found triathlon by doing a bit of swimming and cycling as cross-training when she had some niggles and injuries from just pure running, and has clearly got the bug. So she plans to dive into her first triathlon at the Triton Draft Legal Development Race in San Diego on the 11th of February. She isn't fully done and dusted with track and field though, because she is still planning to race through to 2024, where Paris is going to remain her main goal. But yeah, excited to see her come in. And she's not the only one either, because Yaroslav Kulve, the two-time Olympian, medalist as well, UCI World Cup and World Championship winner, has decided to take to Xterra racing. It's time, he says. I've been thinking about racing triathlons for a few years now. He swam from a young age of 16 before turning his focus to mountain biking. Continues to say that the original plan was to do Ironman races, but I think Xterra is a better fit, of course, because it's mountain biking, but also because the run is in nature, which suits my running technique better. I really like the locations of the Xterra races and how the sport is growing. And finally, some event news. For 2024, World Triathlon have announced the Multisport Championships that are now going to be taking place in Townsville, Australia from the 15th to the 25th of August. It's going to be taking place over 12 days with 19 events spanning 5 different levels of athletes, including age group, para-triathletes, junior, under 23, and elites. So very exciting. And finally, just to round out with, in case you missed it on some of our other shows, we are going to the Global Bike Festival. Yeah, each year we have been hosting the Global Bike Festival. This year it's going to be in Salbach, Australia. Sadly, for the last couple of years, we've sat on the sidelines and watched GCN and GMBN having a whale of time out there. Well, they've invited us along this time, and we are going to do it proud, because we've got 20 exclusive spots that you can sign up to, where essentially you get to hang out with us for 4 days. We can go for runs in the morning, go and ride with the GCN and GMBN crew, hang out, enjoy some of the live music, some of the films, have a drink, and just generally soak in the atmosphere. So if you're interested, you can head on over to the link that's in the description down below for more details, and hopefully see some of you in Salbach, Austria between the 15th to the 18th of June. And now for What the Tech. Yeah, I've got a couple of fun bits for you today. So this one's spotted over on Instagram account Wheelbased, who often leak patents or things that have been filed by brands, new designs, etc. There's this one from DT Swiss, who seem to be creating some aerodynamic tyres. So they say that these little aero elements that are on kind of the sidewall of the tyre cause a small amount of turbulence in the surrounding airflow. As a result, the tyre produces the sailing effect, which effectively induces a level of propulsion at higher yaw angles. So as you can see from some of the little diagrams, it's got like almost a little cutout into the edge of the tyre, which, yes, might be used for grip in some instances, but here they're using it for aerodynamic purposes. So yeah, be interested to see if that materialises in the near future. Moving on though, Nike are suing Lululemon. They say that they are claiming the athleisure's brand has infringed on one of its patents. It says it's related to its Flyknit technology. Specifically, Nike claim that it relates to the way that the shoes in question are manufactured, as well as their textile and structural elements. Gripping stuff. So, more drama with the sportswear giant, so let's see how that one unfolds. Now for the race news, we just got one event from this weekend. It's Ironman 70.3 Tasmania. It was Josh Amberger that led the swim out there, no surprises, but hotly followed by Jake Birtwistle in his first 70.3. Matt Burton and Mitch Kibbe moved to the lead heading into T2, and it was Caleb Noble that actually took the lead early on into the run, but soon enough he was caught by Jake Birtwistle. Jake Birtwistle went on to take the win. Mitch Kibbe actually came through to take second ahead of Caleb Noble in third and Josh Amberger in fourth. I've got to say, that's a pretty impressive start to Jacob Birtwistle's 70.3 career, considering that is literally his first middle distance race, though he is still setting his sights on the Paris Olympics. But when the time comes, it looks like he's ready for that longer distance racing too. In the women's race, Ellie Salthouse continued where she left off at the end of 2022 with impressive victory, leading pretty much from wire to wire. She took the win by a good minute ahead of Grace Steck in second and Penny Slater in third. All right, now moving on to some of the stuff that you lovely people have sent in to us. Don't forget, you too can do the same using the photo uploader link. That is on screen right now, or you can find that in the description down below. And please do just send in anything that you're up to, triathlon related, please. Training, your pain cave, your bike, whatever you like. stuff like this. So first one coming in from Felicia from Denver in Colorado. She said, just completed my 30 and 30 for January with us guys. A business trip in the middle made things tricky, but I at least went for a walk each day, even if I couldn't train 2 travel days and 1 full day off. I feel like this is my strongest start to a year ever. I love that. It's awesome. And thanks for editing that together. It's a really creative way of doing that. So brilliant. And yeah, let us know if you got involved in our 30 and 30 through January in the comment section down below. And thank you if you got stuck into some of the rides and runs with us. Next one from Martin in Lanzarote. He says, somewhere on the southwest of Lanzarote, you look like you're maybe towards the road to Orzola. I might be wrong there. He's on Cervelo P3X, as you can see in the photo. He says he's doing a little training camp before Ironman South Africa. Glad I brought the low rim wheels. Yeah, that's a must for Lanzarote with the winds. Great catching some sun and being able to ride outside in February. Lovely stuff. Next one, also a Cervelo PX from Nathan. He's at Castle Air Force Base Museum at Water. He's enjoying a sunny day, even though temperatures were in their 30s Fahrenheit. Haha. But he's taking this photo in front of a massive plane. I think it's the Blackbird, they call it. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section down below, but that's a pretty cool plane to be able to take a photo of your bike next to. Next one, final one, also a Cervelo. What is going on? From Marty, he's on a Cervelo P series with his bike set up in his pain cave. Says geared and ready for a long ride on a cold weekend. Lots of GTN and GCN in the YouTube queue. Well, thank you very much for tuning in and watching us. I'm sorry you had to endure us for so long on a long ride there. Well, yeah, please keep your photos and videos coming in. As I said, use that photo uploader on screen right now, or description down below. And finally, we've got a caption competition. Last week we had this photo of 2 chaps running into the water in a race and looking a little bit nervous about things. Had loads of captions coming in. First one from Emma G said, when the tide is high and you're holding on. That's actually one of James's favourite songs. I think he actually prefers the Atomic Kitten version to the older Blondie version, but I might have to check with him on that. He does sing it a lot in the office. Anyway, Dave Stecker said, no. That is not how GTN taught us to attack the waves. Andrew Lovelock, I'm just getting a feel for the water. Christoph, not the sort of wave I was prepared for. We've got 2 from Savage Pro. When GCN presenters stop ridiculing triathletes and try their first time. Yeah, I would actually like to see Cy Richardson run into some waves that size. Also said, never watch Shark Week before doing an Ironman. But the winner is Richard Monell. I might have started in too strong a wave. Very good. You are the winner of the Caption Comp this week. Get in touch and we'll ping a cap out to you right away. But this week we've got this photo. Yep, do your best in the comment section down below. But that is it for the show this week. We've got loads coming up on the channel, including a video looking at lactate testing, what it is, why we're seeing so many pros using it, and should you be using it too? Pretty interesting stuff. Now, if you haven't done so already, do head on over to the GTN shop so you can get hold of some merch, some t-shirts and things like this. And whilst you're at it, make sure you give this video a like, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not doing so already. And if you haven't already checked it out, you should head on over and check out our Zwift World Championships from the weekend, in which we take on GCN and GMBN in an ultimate Zwift battle.